The Evolution of Desire, Strategies of Human Mating by David M. Buss. Have you ever wondered why love can feel like the most magical force on earth while also being the source of our deepest pain? We grow up on stories of finding the one, of true love and happily ever after. We see it in movies, hear it in songs, and many of us carry that hope deep in our hearts. Yet reality tells a different story. We see relationships fractured by jealousy, marriages ending in bitter divorce, and the quiet heartbreak of infidelity. Nearly half of all marriages don't last, and studies show that a staggering number of people in committed relationships have affairs. It's a paradox that can leave you feeling lost. We're told that love should be simple, but it feels incredibly complicated. We're told that conflict means failure, but it seems to be everywhere. If humans are built for connection, why are we so often at odds with the people we care about most? For decades, we've tried to answer this by looking at culture, upbringing, or personal flaws. But what if the real answers aren't found in our lifetime, but in the deep, ancient history of our species? This is the journey that psychologist David M. Buss invites us on in his groundbreaking book, The Evolution of Desire. When first published, it sent shockwaves through the scientific community. For years, the prevailing belief was that men's and women's minds were essentially blank slates, shaped entirely by culture. Buss dared to ask a different, more provocative question. What if our desires, who we're attracted to, why we cheat, why we fall in love, aren't random, but are instead ancient strategies etched into our minds by millennia of evolution? He launched one of the largest studies on human mating ever conducted, involving over 10,000 people from 37 cultures across 6 continents, from the bustling cities of Brazil to the rural villages of Zambia. What he found was astonishing. Beneath the surface of our diverse cultures, he uncovered a universal psychology of desire, a set of common strategies that all humans use to navigate the complex world of mating. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this hidden world. We're going to explore the secret rulebook of human desire. By the end of our journey, you won't just understand that we fall in love, or feel jealousy, or seek certain partners. You'll understand why. You'll see the invisible forces that shape your own attractions, and the dynamics in every relationship around you. This knowledge is a kind of superpower. It can bring clarity to confusion, empathy to conflict, and a profound understanding of what it truly means to be human. So, let's begin. To understand the heart of David Buss's work, we start with a single, powerful idea. Every single person alive today is an evolutionary success story. You, me, everyone we know, we are descendants of a long, unbroken line of ancestors who succeeded at 2 of life's greatest challenges, survival and mating. If even one person in that chain, stretching back thousands of generations, had failed to attract a partner and have a child who survived, none of us would be here. Our minds, just like our bodies, have been shaped by that history. We carry the wisdom of our ancestors, not in conscious thoughts, but in our deepest emotions and desires. Our feelings of love, our pangs of jealousy, our standards of beauty, these aren't random. They are what Buss calls evolved sexual strategies. They are time-tested solutions to the recurring problems our ancestors faced in the critical game of mating. So what was the most fundamental problem? It all begins with a simple biological fact, the very definition of male and female. In the animal kingdom, females are the sex with the large sex cells, eggs, which are limited in number and biologically expensive to produce. Males are the sex with the small, mobile sex cells, sperm, which are produced by the millions and are biologically cheap. This single difference sets the stage for everything else. For a woman, a single act of sex can lead to a 9-month pregnancy, the dangers of childbirth, and years of nursing and raising a child. It's an enormous investment of time, energy, and resources. For a man, the minimum investment can be as little as a few minutes and a few million sperm. This asymmetry in what's called parental investment is the engine that drives our mating psychology. Because women have historically made the bigger initial investment, they have evolved to be the more selective and choosier sex. Think about it. If you have only a few precious opportunities to pass on your genes, you're going to be incredibly careful about who you choose as a partner. A poor choice could lead to hardship, abandonment, or children who don't survive. A wise choice could mean security, protection, and thriving offspring. This is the foundation of what women want. It's not about culture or capitalism. It's a deep, evolved strategy for making the most of those precious reproductive opportunities. So what exactly have women evolved to look for in a long-term partner? Buss's massive cross-cultural study revealed a stunningly consistent pattern. Across the globe, from Nigeria to Finland, women placed high value on a man's ability to provide resources. This isn't just about money in the bank. In our ancestral past, it was about who was the better hunter, who could defend territory, and who could provide for a family. Today the cues have changed, but the underlying desire remains. Women consistently value good financial prospects, social status, and ambition. A fascinating study asked college women to state their minimum acceptable earning capacity for a future husband. On average, they wanted a man who earned more than 70% of all other men. Men, when asked the same about a wife, said they'd be fine with someone in the 40th percentile. This isn't about being greedy. It's about an evolved mechanism that seeks signals of a man's ability to invest and protect. This is also why women, across all 37 cultures in Buss's study, preferred men who were slightly older. On average, women preferred a man about 3.5 years their senior. Why? Because age is often a reliable cue to resources and status. A man in his late 20s or 30s has had more time to establish himself, to demonstrate his skills, and to accumulate resources than a man in his late teens. His status is more predictable. In our ancestral world, hunting ability also peaked in a man's 30s, when physical strength was balanced by wisdom and experience. But resources and status are only part of the equation. A man could have all the wealth in the world, but if he's unreliable or emotionally unstable, he might bring more costs than benefits. This is why women universally rated two other qualities as incredibly important: dependability and emotional stability. These traits are powerful signals that a man will be a consistent provider and a reliable partner, not someone who will drain resources, cause chaos, or abandon the family in a time of need. An emotionally unstable man is a gamble, and evolution has shaped women to be risk-averse when choosing a lifelong partner. Of course, a man's willingness to invest those resources specifically in her and their future children is the ultimate prize. This is where the most powerful cues of all come in: love and commitment. Buss found that across the globe, love was seen as one of the most indispensable ingredients for marriage by both men and women. Why is love so important from an evolutionary perspective? Because acts of love are powerful, public signals of commitment. When a man is willing to give up romantic relations with other women, when he channels his time and attention to one person, when he offers emotional support during tough times, these are all honest signals that he intends to commit his resources exclusively to one partner. Women who prioritized finding a partner who showed these signs of love and commitment were far more likely to secure a reliable, investing partner, giving them and their children a significant advantage. So to recap the female long-term strategy, it's a sophisticated system for identifying men who are not just able to invest, signaled by resources, status, and ambition, but are also willing to invest reliably over the long haul, signaled by dependability, stability, and acts of love and commitment. Now let's turn the tables. If women evolved to be the choosier sex, what adaptive problems did men have to solve? For a man seeking a long-term partner, the central challenge was identifying a woman who was fertile, that is, capable of having children. Unlike many other primates, human females don't have obvious physical signals when they're ovulating. There's no bright red swelling or powerful scent that announces, "I'm fertile now." This concealed ovulation created a profound adaptive problem for our male ancestors. They couldn't just guard a female for a few days during her fertile period. To ensure paternity, they had to secure repeated sexual access over time. This is one of the primary evolutionary pressures that led to the formation of long-term bonds and marriage. But if ovulation is hidden, how could men gauge a woman's reproductive potential? They evolved to focus on reliable, observable cues. And the two most powerful cues are youth and health. A woman's fertility peaks in her mid-20s and then declines steadily, dropping to near zero by age 50. A man's fertility, in contrast, declines much more slowly and can extend well into old age. This stark biological reality meant that ancestral men who preferred younger partners had a massive reproductive advantage over those who didn't. This preference is not a product of Western media or a modern obsession with youth. It is a human universal. In all 37 cultures Buss studied, without exception, men preferred to marry women who were younger than them. On average, men wanted a wife who was about 2.5 years younger, and as men get older, they prefer an even larger age gap. A man in his 30s might prefer a woman 5 years younger, while a man in his 50s might prefer a woman 10 to 20 years younger. This isn't about power or control. It's a finely tuned strategy that tracks a woman's reproductive value over her lifespan. The most fascinating part of this theory is a counterintuitive prediction it makes. What about teenage boys? If men are driven by fertility, they shouldn't be attracted to women their own age or younger, because those girls are less fertile than women in their late teens or early 20s. And that's exactly what the research shows. Teenage boys are most attracted to women who are slightly older than them, women who, ironically, are usually not the least bit interested in them. This pattern beautifully supports the evolutionary logic. Male desire isn't just about youth, it's about peak fertility. The second major cue to reproductive value is health. And the standards of what we call beauty are, in large part, an evolved system for detecting health and youth. Full lips, smooth, clear skin, bright, clear eyes, and lustrous hair are all signals of youth and vitality. We find these features beautiful because our ancestors who were attracted to them were more likely to choose healthy, fertile partners. These standards are not arbitrary. Studies have shown that even infants as young as 2 or 3 months old will gaze longer at faces that adults have rated as attractive, suggesting these preferences are deeply ingrained and not just learned from culture. Another powerful cue is symmetry. Symmetrical faces and bodies are consistently rated as more attractive. Why? Because environmental stresses, diseases, and genetic mutations can cause small errors during development, leading to asymmetry. A symmetrical body is a signal that a person has had healthy, stable development, an honest advertisement of good genes. Body shape also provides crucial information. The psychologist Devendra Singh discovered that one preference is remarkably consistent across cultures: the preference for a low waist-to-hip ratio in women. A ratio of about 0.7, where the waist is significantly smaller than the hips, is rated as most attractive by men. This isn't just a random preference. This ratio is a reliable indicator of health, youth, and reproductive status. Women with this ratio tend to be more fertile and less susceptible to certain diseases. It's a powerful, honest signal of a woman's reproductive value, and men's minds have been designed to find it beautiful. So we have the first major piece of the male mating puzzle: a deep, evolved desire for partners who display cues of high reproductive value, namely youth and health, which we perceive as beauty. But there's a second, equally important problem that ancestral men had to solve: the problem of paternity, uncertainty. Because fertilization happens inside the woman's body, a man can never be 100% certain that he is the biological father of his partner's child. A woman, on the other hand, is always 100% certain of her maternity. This has been a recurring adaptive problem for men throughout history. Investing years of time, resources, and protection into a child who is not your own is a devastating blow from a reproductive standpoint. The man who did this would see his efforts go toward propagating the genes of a rival, while his own genetic lineage would hit a dead end. As a result, men evolved powerful psychological defenses to increase the odds of their paternity. This is where the desire for sexual fidelity and the emotion of sexual jealousy come from. In the international study, men in the majority of cultures placed higher value on premarital chastity than women did. In the past, before modern contraception, a woman's virginity was a strong cue that she was not already pregnant with another man's child, and it also signaled her likely future faithfulness. While the importance of virginity has declined dramatically in many modern cultures, especially with the availability of birth control, the underlying desire for sexual loyalty remains incredibly strong. Buss's research found that faithfulness and sexual loyalty are the most highly valued traits men look for in a long-term partner. And conversely, unfaithfulness is seen as the single most undesirable trait a wife could have. This leads us to one of the most well-documented and controversial differences between the sexes, the triggers of jealousy. While both men and women experience jealousy with equal intensity, what makes them jealous is different. Buss asked men and women a simple but profound question. What would upset you more? Your partner having passionate sexual intercourse with someone else, or your partner forming a deep emotional attachment to someone else? The results were stark. A large majority of women, around 83%, said that emotional infidelity was more upsetting. Why? Because a man's emotional attachment to another woman is a powerful signal that he might divert his time, resources, and commitment away from her and her children. The ultimate threat to a woman's long-term strategy. A majority of men, around 60%, said that sexual infidelity was more upsetting. Why? Because a woman's sexual infidelity introduces the risk of paternity uncertainty. It threatens the very core of a man's reproductive strategy. This isn't just about hurt feelings. It's a deep-seated adaptive response to different threats. Buss even hooked people up to physiological monitors and found that men's heart rates and stress levels shot up when they imagined sexual infidelity, while women's did so when they imagined emotional infidelity. This difference has been found across cultures, from the United States to Korea and Japan, suggesting it's a fundamental part of our evolved psychology. So far, we've painted a picture of two distinct, though often complementary, long-term strategies. Women prioritize a man's ability and willingness to invest. Men prioritize a woman's reproductive capacity and fidelity. But this is only half the story. Human mating isn't always about finding a lifelong partner. Both men and women also have a short-term or casual sexual strategy in their repertoire. And when the goal shifts from marriage to a brief fling, the rules of desire change dramatically. The potential benefits of casual sex have always been vastly different for men and women. For an ancestral man, every new partner offered an opportunity to produce another child with very little investment. This created a powerful selective pressure for a male psychology designed to seek sexual variety. Buss's research has uncovered a suite of psychological adaptations in men that facilitate this strategy. First is a powerful desire for sexual variety. When asked how many sexual partners they would ideally like to have in their lifetime, women on average said 4 or 5. Men on average said 18. This difference holds up across cultures worldwide, even in highly egalitarian societies like Norway. Second, men are far more willing to have sex with someone after knowing them for only a short period of time. After knowing someone for just 1 week, men are still generally open to the idea of sex. For most women, that's a virtual impossibility. This quickness solves the problem of number and variety. The less time invested per partner, the more partners a man can pursue. Third, men dramatically lower their standards for a short-term partner. When looking for a wife, a man is just as choosy as a woman, looking for intelligence, kindness, and dependability. But for a casual encounter, those standards drop precipitously. Men become less concerned with a woman's personality, intelligence, or emotional stability. There are only a few things they become more demanding about for casual sex. They dislike women who seem prudish or have a low sex drive, and they are repelled by any woman who seems to want a commitment. This relaxation of standards dramatically expands the pool of potential partners. Finally, we have the Coolidge effect, the male tendency to experience renewed sexual arousal in the presence of a novel female. This has been documented in many mammal species. A bull, for example, will mate with a cow and then quickly lose interest, but his sexual arousal will return to full strength if a new cow is introduced. This mechanism, however uncomfortable it may be to acknowledge, motivates the pursuit of new sexual opportunities. In humans, it's reflected in the decline of sexual frequency in long-term relationships and is a major driver of men's desire for extramarital affairs. But here's the crucial question. If men evolved such a powerful desire for casual sex, how could that strategy ever succeed unless at least some women were also willing to participate? It takes two, after all. For a long time, the benefits of short-term mating for women were a mystery, largely ignored by scientists. A woman can't increase her number of children by having more partners, so what could she possibly gain from a casual encounter? Buss and other evolutionary psychologists have uncovered several potential adaptive benefits for women. First, and perhaps most straightforward, is immediate resource extraction. Throughout history, women have sometimes engaged in brief affairs in exchange for gifts, food, or other resources. This is reflected today in women's short-term preferences. When looking for a casual partner, women place much higher value on a man who is generous with his money, buys them gifts, and has an extravagant lifestyle. A second potential benefit is using short-term encounters as an assessment tool, a way to test drive potential long-term mates, or to compare different men. An affair can reveal a lot about a man's personality, his intentions, and his sexual compatibility before a woman makes the much larger commitment of marriage. This is why, even in short-term contexts, women still dislike men who are already in a committed relationship or are promiscuous. These are red flags that the man is unavailable or unwilling to commit in the future. A third, and perhaps most intriguing function, is mate switching. A woman in an unhappy or unfulfilling relationship might use an affair as a way to trade up to a better partner or to have a backup mate ready in case her current relationship ends. Studies show that women are far more likely than men to have affairs when they're unhappy with their primary relationship, and they're more likely to fall in love with their affair partner, suggesting that the affair is often a bridge to a new long-term mateship. Finally, there is the good genes hypothesis. A woman might be in a committed relationship with a reliable, high-investing partner who is a good father, but she might have an affair with a man who is more physically attractive, dominant, or masculine. The idea is that she gets the best of both worlds, reliable investment from her husband, and superior genes for her children from her affair partner. This may lead to what's called the sexy son hypothesis. By mating with an attractive man, she might have sons who are also attractive and will have greater reproductive success in the next generation. Evidence for this comes from fascinating studies showing that women's preferences shift when they're ovulating, the most fertile point in their cycle. During this time, women who are not on hormonal birth control find more masculine faces, voices, and bodies to be more attractive, especially for a short-term affair. It's as if their psychology subtly shifts to prioritize genetic quality when the chance of conception is highest. So we have a complex picture. Both men and women have both long-term and short-term strategies. But the design and function of these strategies are different, tailored to solve different adaptive problems. And it is when these different strategies collide that we see the origins of sexual conflict. Buss calls this strategic interference. Conflict occurs whenever the strategy of one person interferes with the strategy of another. A man seeking casual sex with minimal investment interferes with a woman's strategy of requiring signs of commitment before consenting to sex. Her strategy, in turn, interferes with his. This isn't a sign of moral failing. It's an inevitable consequence of two different psychologies pursuing different, and sometimes opposing, goals. This interference leads to a perpetual evolutionary arms race. Men evolve strategies to deceive women about their commitment, pretending to be more interested in a relationship than they really are to gain sexual access. Women, in turn, evolve counter-strategies for detecting deception, like requiring longer courtship periods and looking for costly signals of commitment that are hard to fake. This conflict also explains some of the most common complaints men and women have about each other. Men complain that women are sexually withholding or that they lead them on. From an evolutionary perspective, withholding sex is a core part of the female strategy to increase its value and to ensure that it is exchanged for commitment or high quality. Women complain that men are too pushy or aggressive about sex. This stems from the male strategy of minimizing investment and seeking quick sexual access. Sometimes, this conflict escalates into darker territory. Buss argues that sexual harassment is often a manifestation of a male's short-term mating strategy playing out in the wrong context. The typical victims, young, single, attractive women, are precisely those who trigger male sexual interest. The harasser is often acting on a misperception of sexual interest, the sexual overperception bias, where men are more likely to interpret a friendly smile or an incidental touch as a sexual come-on. Women, on the other hand, find this unwanted attention incredibly distressing, especially when it comes from a low-status man. The strategies for keeping a mate once you've attracted one also show this gender-differentiated design. Both men and women engage in mate retention tactics. Many of these are positive, like continuing to show love and kindness or providing resources. But there's also a dark side. Both sexes use jealousy-inducing tactics, and in the most extreme cases, men's sexual jealousy, driven by the fear of cuckoldry, is the leading cause of intimate partner violence and spousal homicide across cultures. Even breaking up reveals these different strategies. Across cultures, the most common causes of divorce are infidelity and infertility, direct blows to the reproductive goals of a mateship. A wife's infidelity is a far more common cause of divorce than a husband's, reflecting the greater threat it poses to a man's certainty of paternity. A husband's failure to provide economic support is a major cause of divorce initiated by women, reflecting the threat it poses to her need for investment. As we move through life, these strategies continue to shift and change. A woman's mate value, tied closely to her fertility, tends to decline after her mid-20s. A man's mate value, tied more to his status and resources, can often increase well into his 30s and 40s. This creates what's sometimes called the marriage squeeze, especially for educated, successful women who find that as they get older, the pool of men they consider their equals shrinks, while those same men have an ever-expanding pool of younger women to choose from. This dynamic explains why men who divorce tend to remarry women who are increasingly younger, while older women find it much harder to remarry. It's not a flaw in our culture. It's the predictable outcome of our evolved mating psychology playing out over the course of a lifetime. When you step back and look at the whole picture that David Buss paints, it can seem a little, bleak. A world of competition, conflict, deception, and strategies, driven by the cold calculus of reproductive success. But that's not the full story. Within this framework also lies the key to harmony. The deepest, most profound cooperation between the sexes is found in the formation of a committed, loving partnership. When two people's interests align, most powerfully through the shared genetic interest in their children, they can form a bond of trust and reciprocity that is unparalleled in the animal kingdom. Harmony, Buss argues, comes from understanding and fulfilling each other's evolved desires. A man's happiness in a relationship is strongly linked to his wife's physical attractiveness and her loyalty. A woman's happiness is strongly linked to her husband's status, resources, kindness, and commitment. When these core desires are met, relationships thrive. When they're ignored or violated, conflict is inevitable. This knowledge doesn't doom us to be puppets of our evolutionary past. In fact, it does the opposite. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, we are a species that can understand our own programming. We can't erase our desires, but we can understand where they come from. We can recognize when they're being triggered, and we can choose how to act on them. We can create environments that minimize jealousy, or we can stoke its flames. We can choose to be honest about our intentions, or we can engage in deception. We can understand that when our partner complains, they're often signaling an unmet need rooted deep in their evolutionary psychology. The evolution of desire has given us a complex and sometimes contradictory set of strategies. It has given us the capacity for profound love and cooperation, and also for conflict and betrayal. The path to harmony isn't to deny these differences or to wish they didn't exist. It's to understand them, to respect them, and to use that knowledge to build relationships that are not just successful in an evolutionary sense, but are also filled with the empathy, trust, and deep satisfaction that we all crave. When you finish a book like The Evolution of Desire, it feels a bit like you've been given a pair of glasses that let you see the hidden code running beneath all of human social life. Suddenly, the confusing and often painful dynamics of dating, love, and heartbreak don't seem so random anymore. They start to fall into predictable patterns, driven by a logic that is millions of years old. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the shift from judgment to understanding. It's easy to label a man who desires younger women as shallow, or a woman who desires a successful man as a gold digger. But Buss's work gently encourages us to look deeper. It suggests that these aren't moral failings. They are echoes of ancient survival strategies that helped our ancestors navigate their world. A man's focus on beauty wasn't about vanity. It was about finding a healthy, fertile partner to carry on his lineage. A woman's focus on resources wasn't about greed. It was about ensuring her children would be protected and provided for in a harsh and dangerous world. This perspective doesn't excuse bad behavior. It doesn't justify infidelity, coercion, or cruelty. But it does explain it. And that explanation is incredibly powerful, because it allows us to approach conflict with a sense of empathy rather than blame. When we understand the why behind someone's desires or fears, we can address the root cause instead of just reacting to the surface behavior. The second profound takeaway is the idea that we all have a flexible repertoire of mating strategies. The book beautifully dismantles the simplistic stereotype of the promiscuous, commitment-phobic man and the monogamous, purely domestic woman. The truth is far more complex and interesting. Men have a deep capacity for commitment, love, and paternal investment. And women have a strategic capacity for casual sex, for seeking better genes, and for switching mates when their needs aren't being met. This is empowering. It means we're not locked into a single, preordained path. We can choose which strategies to pursue based on our stage of life, our personal values, and the environment we're in. The rise of reliable contraception, for example, has dramatically changed the cost-benefit analysis of casual sex, especially for women, allowing for a fuller expression of that part of our mating repertoire. Understanding that we have this menu of options gives us more control over our own destiny. So how can you apply these profound ideas to your own life, starting today? Here are a few simple actions. First, practice self-awareness with compassion. The next time you feel a strong sense of attraction, or a pang of jealousy, or even a moment of dissatisfaction in a relationship, take a step back and ask, why? Try to connect that feeling to one of the evolved desires we've talked about. Are you feeling jealous because of a threat to your partner's sexual loyalty or their emotional commitment? Are you attracted to someone because they signal good genes or because they signal reliability and investment? You don't have to act on these feelings, but simply recognizing their ancient origins can give you a sense of clarity and control. Second, become a better listener by translating complaints. When a partner expresses frustration, try to hear the underlying evolved need. If a woman says, "You never spend time with me anymore," she might be signaling a deep-seated need for signs of commitment and investment. If a man expresses frustration about a lack of intimacy, he might be signaling a need to feel desired and to affirm the sexual bond that ensures fidelity. Seeing complaints as signals, rather than attacks, can transform conflict into an opportunity for deeper connection. And finally, recognize that a successful long-term relationship is a cooperative achievement, not a default state. It requires a conscious effort to continue fulfilling each other's core desires. For men, this means never taking for granted a woman's need for kindness, attention, and demonstrated commitment. For women, it means understanding a man's need for admiration, respect, and a vital sexual connection. Harmony isn't the absence of conflict. It's the result of two people actively working to understand and meet each other's deepest needs. That was a summary of The Evolution of Desire by David M. Buss. We've explored the main currents of this incredible book today, but let's be honest, a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the major cities and highways, but it can never replace the experience of actually walking the streets, breathing the air, and meeting the people. The real magic of a book like this happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple insight connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or resonated with your own experiences, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself, your relationships, and the entire human drama unfolding around you. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more curious minds, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.